Lots and lots of new developments in the New York City mayor's race. Queens Assemblyman Zohran Mamdani, who surged to second place in some polls before Andrew Cuomo and Adrian Adams entered the race, is here to help sort it all out. But before we get to the exact mayor's race, on Friday, Mayor Adams decided to replace the number of deputy mayors who resigned with new deputy mayors. How do you feel about that? You know, the fact that this is like the third turnover since he became mayor.
I think it just shows his complete lack of interest in actually delivering on the responsibilities of his job. And so many elected officials and New Yorkers have had their confidence shaken because of the fact that he's gone through so many different top officials in his administration. And the number of deputy mayors who resigned most recently are the ones that many of us have been crediting with steering the ship in this time of turbulence. And yet what we've seen is that there will always be turbulence if Mayor Eric Adams is the mayor of the city, because that is what characterizes his administration. So
do you think that that disqualifies him as a candidate, or do you think that voters will just say it's a natural turnover of government?
I think voters know that this is far beyond that what is natural. And to me, what's disqualified him as our mayor is that he is the first mayor to be serving under a sitting indictment in modern history of the city. And he said early when it was first served to him that he would fight it with every ounce of strength and spirit in his body. And it begged the question, where does that leave New Yorkers? How could we have a mayor for whom New Yorkers are his second priority? And right now, we've seen that in a moment when New Yorkers want courage and conviction from their mayor, they've found cowardice and collaboration with a mayor who's working with the Donald Trump administration.
Well, you know, that's the question. Do you think that he says he's running, but do you think he's really going to run?
I have no idea. I've tried to stop predicting what Eric Adams does next.
So we've had in the last week the entry into the mayor's race of two people, Andrew Cuomo and Adrian Adams. How does that shake up the race?
You know, I think Andrew Cuomo's arrival has long been rumored, and I'm frankly happy that he's in the race because, you know, it's an opportunity to say that New Yorkers already have one person in power who has cut Medicaid and stolen money from the MTA, who has hounded women that have credibly accused them of sexual harassment, who has claimed to be fighting for working class New Yorkers while showering rich donors with tax breaks. And that's Donald Trump. But Andrew Cuomo has the same record as the disgraced former governor of the state. And him being in the race means he has to finally answer as to why that's his record and why we should believe that anything would be different this time around.
But he had name recognition, and all the polls leading up to his entry showed him far and away leading the field.
Yes, you know, I think a lot of that has to do with the mythology of who he is as opposed to the reality of it. And I think now that he's in the field, he has to answer those questions. And what we've seen is that he doesn't have the answers to them. And I think that his lead that he has right now is one that I'm confident we will be able to overtake as more and more New Yorkers are reminded of what his actual record was.
So what's the mythology?
I think the mythology is the one that he tells New Yorkers, that he is the steady hand in a time of chaos, that he took us through this period of COVID when in reality he was sending grandparents into nursing homes and collecting a $5 million check to write a book about it at the same time. And a reality that ultimately Andrew Cuomo is the chaos. And what we need is a break from the disgrace of the past, the disgrace of the present, and actually a future that's worth fighting for.
What about Adrian Adams? If she won, she would become not only the first woman, but the first person of color and a woman.
You know, I welcome her entry into this race, and I think I've said from the very beginning of this campaign, the only two candidates I'm going to critique are disgraced New York executives, whether past or present, no one else.
Well, you've got two disgraced people.
Yes,
so
yes, we do.
I was going to say, who do you think is the biggest threat, though?
I would say Andrew Cuomo, because
why?
Andrew Cuomo is the biggest threat because of the fact that he comes into this race with an independent expenditure being set up to spend $15 million to support him. And the challenge that we now have is to make clear to New Yorkers that he is running for Eric Adams' second term. The same agenda, the same donors, the same chaos.
You're linking him to Eric Adams?
Absolutely.
He's running for Eric Adams' second term?
Absolutely. And if you ask Andrew Cuomo right now to have any critiques of Eric Adams' mayoralty, he is shy to offer any.
Are you saying because you think that they have the same base?
I think that they have the same donors, they have the same agenda, and also the same links to corruption. If you look at Andrew Cuomo's time as the governor, you will see a governor who took almost every opportunity to stymie the attempts to put an end to corruption in Albany, and whose top aides had to deal with the very kind of accusations and legal cases that we've seen take place under Mayor Adams.
So The question then becomes, though, there's been all these mayoral forums, and you have shown up to every single one.
Yes.
But there's no Eric Adams, there's no Adrian Adams, there's no Andrew Cuomo. Does it get a little frustrating for you that you're with the other people in the race who are running, but the people that you want to answer the questions are those three people?
Yeah, I would say the people I really want to answer the questions are Eric Adams and Andrew Cuomo. And I think what we're seeing is we don't even know if Eric Adams is running for re-election at this point. But with Andrew Cuomo, he's going to try and run a Rose Garden campaign, one that he doesn't have to engage with questions he doesn't like. He doesn't have to engage with other candidates. But what we're going to show him is that New Yorkers are hungry for a different kind of politics. And we can see that he understands that even at the infancy of his campaign, as he's starting to cherry pick from other campaigns, including ours, for the ideas that he's fighting for.
I was going to get to that. Yeah. Because on Friday, Andrew Cuomo put out his new transportation plan, and one of the things he talked about was free bus service, yes. Which, as you know, you've talked about on this show previously. But the question is, he doesn't think that there's enough money in the MTA budget to have every bus free, which is your proposal. But he does want to look at the idea of expanding it from the 5 bus lines that are now free to all bus lines. I mean, is there really, an ability not to pay for that? I mean, the MTA is totally against all free bus service. How do you feel about it, and how would you justify the MTA doing that when it already came to Albany, where you already serve, for a almost a $69 billion capital plan? I mean, where does the money come from to pay for all free buses?
Absolutely. Look, I think that the MTA has come to Albany because they have about a $33, $34, $35 billion shortfall in their capital budget. And we need to make that shortfall whole. And we can do that.
How do you do that?
Because the beauty of bonding that we have the ability to do is you don't have to put $35 billion at the outset. You can bond out an annual revenue of about $1.6 billion.
Are we talking about new taxes?
I would say where it is appropriate, yes, taxes on the wealthiest, taxes on the most profitable corporations, absolutely. And I think that's one thing that has stood our campaign out from others, is that I am very honest and open and clear about what will be required to pay for this agenda. But to the point about free buses, it will cost around $700 million or so a year to pay for free buses.
The same amount as fare evasion.
Well, that fare evasion also includes toll evasion, I would say. Now, what's critically important is we've seen with the pilot program, free buses increased ridership by up to 38%, decreased assaults on bus drivers by about 39%, and the most significant increase came from riders making less than $28,000 a year. I believe we can actually make this possible because that $700 or so million, it's in the context of a city budget that in times of economic growth grows by $2 to $3 billion a year. At around, it's now $115 billion. A state budget, which is about $250 billion. And I have seen us find money for all sorts of things. I've seen us find $1 billion to pay for a Buffalo Bills stadium. But now when it comes to making sure that working class New Yorkers can catch a break, we're being told it's unrealistic. It's just a question of political will.
But if you become mayor, what you're going to have to do is what these anticipated cuts from Washington will mean. How will you do it? We have only about a minute left.
I would say that we need to fight these kinds of cuts, and that's a fight that we haven't even seen from Eric Adams. We saw the Trump administration take $80 million out of a city bank account, and he had to be pressured to sue to get that money back. And a lot of these cuts are ones that Trump and Republicans think they can make because they have the power of the narrative as to waste or fraud, when in reality, these are cuts to working class people's lives. And I will make that clear with the bully pulpit of the mayor's office, and also fight for the new revenue we need from Albany to make sure we can fight those cuts off and deliver this ambitious agenda.
But how will you do that? I mean, there's not a lot of love for New York coming from Washington.
No, there isn't. But I also think that we haven't yet seen what we can win when we actually fight. Look at what's happening in Mexico. They were threatened with those tariffs. Claudia Sheinbaum, the president, stood up, fought it, and now there's a delay. These are the things we could have in New York City.
Okay, we're going to have to leave it right there for now. Up next, Jack Ciattarelli, the Republican who almost unseated New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy. He's running again, and we'll have him. We are back with State Assemblyman and candidate for Mayor Zohran Mamdani. So, are you having fun campaigning?
I absolutely am. It's a pleasure to speak to New Yorkers across the 5 boroughs.
So what's the best thing about the campaign, and what's the worst thing?
I would say the best thing is a chance to rediscover the city that I love. There's a city that you know, and then when you're pushed to speak to every person in every corner of the 5 boroughs, you understand that there are neighborhoods that you don't know as well as you should. And the worst thing I would say is that I live my life by a Google Calendar. And it's just cut to cut in 15-minute increments. And there are people that I love that I can't see as much, but that's the nature of this job.
So how do you engage younger voters?
I think you speak to them where they are. And so much of our campaign has been about showing a politics that requires no translation, telling people we're fighting to freeze your rent, to make buses fast and free, to deliver universal childcare. People understand what it is that I mean when I say those things. And younger voters are rightfully disillusioned with a lot of politics, and we're finally speaking to that disillusionment.
But younger voters don't always show up at the polls. So how are you going to get them to actually come and vote for you? I mean, the polls show that you do really well with younger voters, but they have to actually go to the polls and put a dot next to your name.
Fill the screen in and put us in their top 5. You know, I think one of the key things is that we are actually giving younger voters something to vote for, and having some politics that they believe in, as opposed to just being against something, I think is a motivation that could bring a lot more people to the polls. Because in the last mayoral election, 2021, only 26% of Democrats voted, 74% stayed home. And we want to speak to those who vote, those who didn't see a reason to, and those who didn't even know, because it's time for our election to reflect our city.
So do you consider yourself an introvert or an extrovert?
I consider myself an extrovert.
What a surprise.
Yeah.
Would you call yourself a good dancer?
An aspiring one.
Do you have a social media of choice?
I would say Instagram is the kindest one.
Kindest?
Kindest. Twitter is the most, most ruthless. Nobody tells me to get deported on Instagram.
So who is or are your political role model or models?
I would say, Bernie Sanders gave me the language of my politics. He showed me what it could look like to fight for working people, and that was my real political awakening in 2016. And I think even in this moment, when many Democrats are looking to simply surrender to a Donald Trump trifecta for the next few years, he's going into Republican districts, holding town halls, and making it clear to those very constituents of the same congresspeople who are voting for these cuts as to what's actually happening in Washington.
So you've called for universal free childcare. How would you pay for that?
So, estimates put the cost of that at around $6 billion a year. And what we've seen is that when you put that money forward, you can see a return on investment of about 10 to 1. That's what they found in Quebec when they made this a reality. And it was because there were far more women entering the workforce than they'd even expected. Now, the payment of it, I think you can actually find between New Jersey, Maine, Delaware, Connecticut, Vermont, so many states around New York in the Northeast have higher corporate tax rates than New York State.
So you increase the corporate tax rate to pay for childcare?
Yes, absolutely. I believe that there's a responsibility for us to lift up every child across the city. And when we look at New Jersey and they have an 11.5% corporate tax rate and New York has 7.25%, we know if we bridge that gap, we could raise these children.
But you're calling on corporations to help pay for a whole bunch of things, the MTA budget, all different kinds of things. At what point do the corporations say, we're leaving New York?
So the beauty of our corporate tax rate in New York is that it taxes the profits of business that they take place here in this state. They could be headquartered anywhere in the country, but as long as they do business here, they are taxable. And we have, if the state was a country, the 10th largest GDP in the world, I don't think any business is going to stop doing business here.
So do you think bipartisanship is dead?
No, I wouldn't say it's dead. I think that it is increasingly difficult.
On life support.
Yeah, it's on life support. But look, I'm someone who's attacked by the New York Post quite regularly, and yet the New York Post endorsed my legislation to repeal the tax exemptions for Columbia and NYU to fund CUNY instead. So there are these moments, and we just have to find them and build on them.
This is a really demanding job.
Yes.
I wonder how you recharge.
I've been asking myself that a little bit more, especially as I'm fasting for Ramadan. I think the recharge comes in the moments with your friends and family, when the world can fall away and you can finally be with the people that you love and remember who you are beyond this work.
Do you have any moments like that? Many moments like that?
I would say at the end of the day, I'm very lucky to be able to come home to an apartment I share with my wife and just share a few moments together where it can be just us in the world as opposed to just the world without us.
So what gives you hope?
I would say the people that I've met on this campaign, it has been so exciting. We have more than 5,000 volunteers, about 125 join every day. And the New Yorkers that I meet that are telling me that this campaign is speaking to them in a way that they haven't been spoken to, it reminds me that there are so many more people out there who are looking for something other than what we're living through. And if we're willing to fight for it, many will join.
Well, you know, you've had some success in fundraising, but you also, you know, in the last poll that we've seen before Andrew Cuomo and Adrian Adams got into the race, you came in number 2. You came in second. So does that give you hope as well? And do you think that your campaign is catching on because of the new ideas that you've been proposing?
Absolutely. I think that New Yorkers are hungry for a different kind of politics, a politics that puts working people first. And I think that these polls, our fundraising, our volunteers, it reflects that we actually want a politics that's worth fighting for, and one that working class people see themselves in. And when we're talking about freezing the rent, building 200,000 new affordable union-built homes, taking on bad landlords, building out a network of municipal grocery stores that guarantee cheaper prices, these are things that people are missing in their lives, and they actually want to fight for it.
Well, I think that the thing that people are reacting to may be the fact that you're willing to think out of the box. I mean, I thought that the idea of municipal grocery stores was an interesting idea that I think, you know, but the question is, are you afraid that the old establishment will come down on your head because you're proposing things that are so out of the mainstream?
I think they'll definitely come down on my head. They're already trying, and I have no doubts that they will increase their efforts. But I'm not afraid of that, because I think that we have shown that we're not waiting for the establishment to start fighting. And though they will come out, and likely there will be millions of dollars in opposition spending, I'm confident of our ability to tell our own story. And that's because of the many New Yorkers who've contributed, so that we can actually put our ads on air, that we can actually have mailers in your mailbox, on your screen, and tell the story of the working class New Yorkers we're fighting for.
Zohran Mamdani, thank you for being here.